China and Russia have teamed up to replace the world's reserve currency, the United States dollar. Economic policies being passed by the party in charge, the Socialist Democrats, are aiding Communist China in their goals. The result will be a catastrophe for the United States of America. Joining me now to discuss is the executive chairman of the Center for Security Policy and vice chairman for the Committee on Present Danger China, Frank Gaffney, and Paul Dayton, author of Correcting Our Financial Miseducation. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Frank, we'll start with you. Explain what China and Russia are up to and how the socialists in Congress and the White House are aiding them.
I think enemies besides Russia and China, but especially the Chinese Communist Party and Vladimir Putin, have understood that if you wish to destroy the United States of America, a very effective way to do that is to destroy its economy, which would be the practical effect of ending our ability to use essentially other people's money to float our debt, and do so with an inflated dollar, that is to say, a dollar that is worth less and less over time. And we're putting ourselves in a position through the assiduous efforts of, as you say, the radical left in this country, specifically Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the administration and the executive branch and their allies in Congress, to essentially destroy the value of the dollar with these immense spending bills that can only essentially be sustained by printing more money. And one thing that history has taught is that is a formula for taking down not only the currency, but if it happens to be the world's reserve currency, ensuring that somebody else replaces it and devastates our economy in the process.
Indeed, Paul, if the United States dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency, what happens to the folks, everyday Americans? Describe what America looks like if that happens.
Well, if that were to happen, obviously the balance of power would shift into somebody else's hands, economic power as well. So what happened is industry, jobs would all disappear, or at least be throttled. There would be mass poverty. It's amazing. These socialist Democrats, they're hearkening back. They have the Green New Deal. They romanticize about this great failure of socialism that happened in the 1930s. They're attacking, demonizing the successful, taxing the rich, soak the rich, pay your fair share, whatever you want to call it. The plain fact is that those socialist policies, which they celebrate and want to go back to, destroyed jobs and kept the Depression going. It's a failure of government. When they jacked up the corporate tax rates in the 30s, prior to that, from 29 to 32, of all the dollars taken in by the government tax, 42% came from corporate tax. But once they raised those rates from 33 to 36, that dropped in half, from 19 to 25% of the tax revenue. Where that money was shifted, they were taking in less total dollars, but it got shifted to excise taxes paid for by the regular folks. So in other words, if people are not going to get a return on their investment, they're not going to invest. They're not going to take the risk of creating jobs. Mass unemployment. That's true.
But folks, and I want you folks to imagine just showing up to a store with a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. You've seen some of the post-World War II photos of that actually happening. And Frank, is there any chance that liberals are just fiscally illiterate in the Congress, or do they know exactly what they're doing here?
Look, I'm sure that there are some who are simply irresponsible or, as you say, ignorant. But I fear that we're in the hands now, particularly in the Congress of the United States, the House and the Senate, of leaders who know full well what they're doing. We've seen this movie before, as you say. It actually goes back to the Weimar Republic in pre-World War II Germany, where you would actually see the value of the mark be so low that you needed a wheelbarrow to go get groceries. What we are confronting, I believe, at the moment is the determined effort of those in power in Washington to bring down the economy of the United States. It sounds unimaginable. It sounds outrageous. And yet it is outrageous, and it is what they are actually doing. Michelle Bachmann, former congresswoman from Minnesota, said the other day, this represents war. on the part of the administration and its allies in Congress against the dollar and, yes, against the American people and our country as well. And our enemies are absolutely going to prosper from this, benefit from it, and be emboldened by it.
Absolutely.
The tokens, I'm afraid, much worse to come.
That seems to be the guiding light of Mr. Biden. If it's good for China, it happens. If it's bad for America, it happens. Paul, I owe you a question. We'll get you back on because we're not going to get fiscal sanity overnight in this country, so there's going to be plenty more to talk about. China is proving to be America's greatest enemy. The China threat is rising. Join us next week here on the Chris Salcedo Show on Newsmax TV, where we expose the truth about communist China. I'll be right back. Still ahead, teenagers charged with the horrific murder of an Uber Eats driver reached a really lenient plea deal. We discuss that next with Diamond and Silk on Newsmax TV.